We are going on a walking tour for 2.5 hours today.
That's fewer of them survived our times. Then what we know is that, and the first record of Jewish community, Jews living in Warsaw, comes from the early 15th century. A court document tells us that by the Jewish street of Warsaw lived 10 Jewish families. This is what we know. So where was the Jewish street? It was right here. Now this is today a private area, but there was no such gate here as this one until Second World War. This was one of the streets of the old town. Buildings here were much closer, beginning much closer. Like the front wall of the building was here. Okay, just these are all reconstructions. So this area was reshaped after the war, and on pre-war Warsaw maps, this was still called the Jewish Street. And it was by that street. So let's have a look at this. It was by the street where, in the 16th century, have a look. This is so and presently Old Town. So as I told you, at that time there were only two churches. There was no castle, as the one which you saw by the column. There was no column in the first place. The big castle was built later for King Sigmund. Then there were no gaps in the city walls, right, as the one which we used to come here. Then there was the building of the town hall in the main square. The river was flowing closer to the old town. Behind each church there was a small cemetery, and there was already the street called the Jewish Street. And it was by the street in this area where there lived that small Jewish community, which consisted of 10 Jewish houses, 10 Jewish families. So how many people are we talking about? This is what the court document is telling us. 10 houses. 10 houses meant 10 families. So how many people are we talking about? Are we talking about 40, 50? Much more than this, between 120 and 150. Because those families were bigger. And this piece of land was taken away from the citizens, from the people of Warsaw, by the central administration, by the Duke, and was given to those Jews. Now, according to majority of historians, it was, so we are here. It was by the other end of the street, so somewhere around this corner, where was situated the first medieval synagogue. Somewhere in some other of the, which from the very beginning was made from bricks. In some other building by the street, there must have been the first mikveh ritual Jewish bathhouse, which was essential for the Jewish community. You could have Jewish community without synagogue, you couldn't have Jewish community without mikveh. In another of those Jewish houses, there must have been the Jewish slaughterhouse. So why somewhere outside this?
my goodness. I'm so behind on my tour. I'm not listening to my tour. I'm busy doing the video and taking pictures.
Gate, situated west of Warsaw at the time, and usually as close to Warsaw, they were building their residences. Behind every such residence there was a garden, but the garden was like not covering all the length of the land. At some point the garden was ending, and as it ends there, and behind the garden, very often those magnates, they were ordering construction of some wooden houses. Sometimes there were so many of them that those houses were forming entire settlements, and they were renting those houses for 300 years ago to the Jews, who also wanted maybe not to have share in ruling the city, but they wanted to have share in doing business with those rich people. Yeah, coming to. Now, how come if I told you the Jews were not allowed to stay in Warsaw? Well, yes, that non tolerandis Judaeis law was still valid, but it was only valid for the city of Warsaw, and Warsaw was formerly 1 and 2. These lands, even with the passage of time, they had already become city. They were not formally a city. They were not under city's jurisdiction. They were actually ruled by those magnates who were so powerful that they could create their own laws for their people. And if some people from the old town, unaware of different jurisdiction here and here, if they were coming, and this is hence his name, this was all about jurisdiction. If they were coming here and complaining to Krasiński, Sir Krasiński, we wanted to complain. Somewhere behind your palace, there are some illegal Jewish houses. There are some illegal Jewish workshops. We don't want any Jews here in Warsaw. Haven't you heard that it's forbidden by our king? Then what Krasiński would answer? He would answer, sorry guys, but that, even though it's not fenced, that is my private property. And those people staying there are my people, my Jews. So this is none of your business.
So laws from jurisdictions were actually...
Because that law was only valid within the city's jurisdiction. And the problem is that, in the 17th and 18th century, this was still the area under city's jurisdiction. Yeah?
It was outside the law.
It was outside, different jurisdiction, even though it had already become part of the city, right? So those Jews started to live here, and they started to trade with some people of Warsaw, yeah? Who at the same time coming to those Jewish shops. They started to live in this area, protected by powerful owners of those lands. And this explains why, with the passage of time, throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th century, this area, situated west of the old town, west of the...
And this is where that huge house was located.
Which I'm holding was taken here. It was taken in the early 1940. How can you know that this picture was taken here?
Gate.
Because the gate is still there. So this street was obviously not ending here. It was going for more than 1 kilometer north of here. And on most of its length it was lined by houses which you will see better in the following pictures. Now this one was taken in the early 1940, and we know it not only because of the presence of the German officer. Now German officer is looking towards this toll bar, some checkpoint, and you may think that this was the ghetto gate and this was the ghetto wall. Not exactly, because this picture was taken in March of 1940 and the ghetto was established in October of 1940. But before the ghetto was established, the Nazis, as soon as in the third month of the Nazi German occupation, they started to restrict different freedoms of the Jews. So Jews, what they did first, and they did it immediately, not even a week after the occupation of Warsaw, all bank accounts were frozen. So frozen, confiscated. Then all synagogues were closed. Then Jews were not allowed to buy railway tickets, so they were not allowed to travel by trains. They were not allowed then to use tram. Walls started to appear. If across the street leading to the area densely populated by the Jews. If a street was a minor one, the Nazis were building a wall just across it to separate that street from like the other part of Warsaw. But if a street was a major one, as in this case, because there was a tram line connecting two sides of Warsaw, then they were putting such checkpoints as this one. So if there was a Polish person walking from the south, from the city center to the north, he was not asked anything. But if that was a Jew coming from the opposite direction, traditionally dressed, not only such person had to ID himself, he had to provide a good reason for crossing the checkpoint. The only accepted reason was, I'm going to work. Obviously that had to be proved by adequate work certificate issued by German authorities. If unable to provide such document, such person was pushed back. But like Jews in that time, once they could cross the checkpoint, when they were crossing the checkpoint, they could still legally be here. It was only in basically half a year later, when 22 gates leading to the ghetto were closed forever, and the Jews found on the side of the wall were executed. So this was the preliminary phase of isolation of the Jews. Now,
sorry to interrupt.
I'm pretty fast, and here we are. Yeah. So the same sign, the same checkpoint. You cannot see the park anymore, but yes, this is the same place. The same place. And what the sign is saying, this is interesting to notice. The sign is not saying checkpoint, show documents. The sign is saying disease restricted area, epidemic area affected by typhus. Tifo, yeah? So in this smart way, the Nazis wanted to discourage Polish people from going there, from meeting, talking to Jews when they still could, by suggesting the Jews were spreading typhus. Now, let's have a look at those Jewish houses which were there behind me, in front of you. So there is now this house which is bright. I mean, it's hard to say if it was white or bright yellow, hard to say. Anyway, you will recognize the same building not only by its bright color, but also by this characteristic semicircular window here. So click, be my assistant, and here we go. This is the same building. Is it? Okay, the building on its left, because by moving from here, okay, now we can compare it. By moving from here to here, not only moved in space, we also moved in time. We moved back in time.
Okay. Are the bullet holes that you see? The little hole there? Those are little bullet holes. Bullet holes.
Buildings there, yeah, you can see rubble just where this plan is. The wall. This line is a bit misleading because it suggests that the wall was here, but they thought that the building was here. There was no garden here. So generally, why the wall was built here and not where the checkpoint was? Because they wanted, the checkpoint was much closer, the Nazis wanted the wall, the red brick wall, to be attached to the wall of the building, and the building was only here. Can you see that wall in some picture? In one picture, yes. And this picture was taken on the first day of the uprising in the ghetto, which explains why the building is on fire. And here we are. This is the small hill which you saw, and this is the building, and this is the wall, which was here. Now the wall. So this is the part. The wall was off. The gate, which served as the main gate, among 22 gates which Germans were using when they were entering the ghetto. Then, how big was the ghetto? You can see it here. So now this map basically shows pure Warsaw. So many streets are different and many things are missing. But well, the old town is already here. This is the main square of the old town. I met you here, and we are here. So this was the ghetto upon creation in autumn of 1940, because with every man 3 kilometers south of here, in that direction. To give you an idea, in this place, after the war here, Soviets built the Palace of Culture and Science, the Soviet Empire State Building, marked in the center of Warsaw, is here. So it was partially built in the area of the former Stalin's, Stalin's birthday cake, however you call it. It was built in the area of the former ghetto.
Okay,
So the ghetto was as long from the north to the south as the distance between the new town, which is behind the old town, and the modern city center. So you may say the ghetto was huge. The ghetto was at the same time huge and small. It was the biggest ghetto by area in.
This is how they recycle the cups, the bottle. Cup. You see? So cute. And this is where they recycle stuff. And that's how they recycle. See, the man is just throwing out his cups or bottles.
Only wall at that time in 1948, that was the only wall which was sticking out from that endless ocean of rubble that the ghetto had been turned into. So in many respects, that memorial behind me is the oldest construction in the range of, at least half kilometer. Because all these buildings were built here later. So we are going slowly towards the end, but the most interesting part is still ahead of us. So stay with me. Don't escape. There is this museum, air conditioned, with cafeteria, a beach bunker. Now, Miła Street. This is one place, and then they are moved to another place. I know that you are quite tired, but it's worth to look at this map. So we are, and Miła. So 5 minutes ago we were here. And right now, this is how we came with the blue street, and we are here. These lines, they symbolize railway tracks, which don't exist today. Railway tracks built before the war by Polish people. This track at around noon. It had a special schedule, which survived. You can see it on Wikipedia. Everything was going, even Holocaust was going according to the schedule. And it was scheduled to arrive in Treblinka 4 hours after departure. But very often those trains, as soon as they were leaving Warsaw, they were entering a side track in the middle of nowhere, and they were stopping, and they were just waiting there for 12 hours, 24 hours. Now, those cattle cars were much smaller than cattle cars used today. This was obviously a place for German gunmen. Such car couldn't contain more than 30 people, and that was even a clear instruction of the manufacturer, because the Nazis were using also those cattle cars to transport their own soldiers to the front line. And there was a clear instruction of the manufacturer that the maximum capacity was 30 people, the Nazis were packing 100. Sometimes even 120. If there was no space, people were terribly squeezed, they would take small kids and throw them above people's heads. So sometimes when those trains were arriving in Treblinka 2-3 days later, after those forced stops, there were more bodies inside than people to pack into gas chambers. That was obviously intentional. I'm not going to talk about Treblinka, because Treblinka deserves a separate tour. Treblinka, called the death camp, was the second most deadly death camp in the history, after Auschwitz, where they probably killed 1.1 million people. In Treblinka, 900,000. We will never know the exact numbers, because everything was destroyed. However, the camp, the very word camp, suggests that people were received and accommodated, and maybe living in this place for 45 minutes. That was the average time of stay.
45 minutes?
45. 15 minutes to undress, 30 minutes in gas chambers. People were killed on arrival. In this way, they killed not only these 300,000 people who are commemorated here, they killed 900,000 Polish Jews. And among them, 1/3 were people who crossed this area on their way to France. Now, this memorial, the last minute. This memorial, I'm telling you, guys, because I see you tired, I'm also tired, yeah? This memorial commemorates those 300,000 people who crossed this area, and we know identity of around 60% of them. So the idea of this architect, of this monument, was to put on this wall not names and family names, but typical first names of pre-war Warsaw Jews. There are 300 names. They are listed following the order of Polish alphabet, because all those Jews were formally, by law, citizens of pre-war Poland. 300 names, 1,000 victims. Now you are probably curious to see how this place looked. Only 3 photographs survived. I will show you now the sharpest. And as I'm usually doing, I will show you the photograph in exactly the same place where it was taken. And it was taken there. And we'll end the story with this photo, okay? It's worth to do the last step. Which survived the war. You can see them. I will put it in the sun. You will see them in this picture. But this time you can see them behind the picture. So which are the 3 buildings which survived? This is the waiting area of the Umschlagplatz. The 3 buildings which survived. The grey one. One. The yellowish one. 2. These are 2 sections of the same building, the pinkish and the whitish, which makes 3. These buildings survived because they were used by the Nazis, and in this place, in that building, there was a headquarters of SS. So from that building they were supervising deportations. In these 2 buildings, people were waiting. In empty rooms of those buildings, people were waiting because this square couldn't contain 5,000 people who were daily deported to Treblinka. So people were also waiting, and some of them dying in these buildings. They were not destroyed also because when the uprising in the ghetto broke out, there was still SS headquarters there. And there were too many Germans in this area, and Jewish fighters never got close to any of these buildings. So there was no need to set them on fire. Last thing which you need to keep in mind, that these 3 buildings, they are not the best example of how the ghetto looked. I told you, it's not. Now multiply these 3 buildings by 1,000, and then you have the ghetto. Because these buildings are relatively modern, because they were built in the late 30s, shortly before the outbreak of the war. This is how the ghetto looked. This is how the ghetto. You can see it in the rest. And they were never used as residential buildings. They were designed to as school buildings. What are they used for today? They are still used as school buildings. That building, the former SS headquarters, houses Faculty of Psychology of the Warsaw University. These 2 buildings inside, there are as many 3 different schools, like middle schools, and 1 high schools, middle school and high school. So if you were visiting Warsaw during the school year, more or less at this time, you see kids jumping out of the building. Do kids know that people were also, what was happening here? I think they don't. Some of the students may know, in the best case scenario. And with this picture, which I find the most impressive, I wanted to end this tour. Now, how to get back to civilization. As I told you, I strongly recommend you, because there is cafeteria there, so you can have coffee, apple pie, you can wash your hands, the exhibition is free of charge, and it's just worth to see the main exhibit. And I'm going to show you the main exhibit, it's really worth it. And this is their highlight, recreated the rooftop of the Gwoździec synagogue, which was burned by Germans, but it was recreated with all details because it had been photographed. So just like enter the museum to see this. So if I were you, I would go to the museum. If for some reason you want to go to the city center, from the bus tram stop by former SS headquarters, take 35 tram.
35.
That tram will take you all the way down to the Palace of Culture and Science, the Soviet Empire State Building. If you get off at the stop called Arsenal, then you are basically by that park, Krasiński Park. So if you decide, okay, we are still going to the Open, but well, no, let's make it shorter. Take it, 35 in that direction, get off at Arsenal. I'm going to give you some maps, and I'm giving you these maps not because Google Maps are better. I'm giving you because of